Patricia Walkow is going to get us started. We'll be introducing these illustrious authors to you tonight. Patricia is an award-winning author of short stories, newspaper and magazine articles. She's the author of the book, The War Within, the Story of Josef, a national and international award-winning biography. She's a member of the Corrales Writing Group, right up the street from our shop. Her work appears regularly in print and online anthologies, and she is an editor and contributor to several of the group's latest anthologies, including Kale is a four-letter word. Ms. Walkow is a curator, editor, and a contributor to the book New Mexico Remembers 9/11. Got an anniversary for that coming up. She is a member of New Mexico Press Women, the National Association of Press Women, Military Writers Society of America, and she's on the board of Southwest Writers, the group we're celebrating tonight. Patricia, thank you so much for spearheading this. It's nice to see you this evening.
Thank you very much. I'm going to share my screen in a moment, and I'm assuming, Amanda, you're going to let the other people into the meeting. They're in the waiting room. Okay, I'm going to start sharing my screen, so give me a second. All right. Let me set this up as a slideshow. Can you see the screen, the presentation? Okay. And I would like to thank Bookworks for hosting Southwest Writers tonight as we finally present some winning stories from the 2019 and 2020 anthologies that were created as a result of the various writing contests that we have had over those years. So thank you, Bookworks. The anthologies, the left one, 2019, is called the Southwest Writers Award-Winning Short Stories and Poetry, and the one on the right is called Seeing the World in 2020. And in both anthologies, there are many award-winning authors who submitted stories, and these anthologies carry the first, second, and third place winnings in each of those contests. I'm going to turn the next section over to Brenda Cole. If you could unmute yourself, Brenda. You can't unmute yourself? Amanda, can you unmute her?
Hi, Brenda.
Hi there.
Brenda is our contest chair, and she's going to talk to us about the contest. And she's also an award-winning author herself, but we will read her bio later. Go ahead, Brenda.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Brenda Cole. I'm chairwoman of Seeing the World in 2020 contest, which is this year's. And you might be wondering why Southwest Writers even holds contests. One of our mottos is writers helping writers. There are many kinds of writers. Some are seasoned professionals with many awards and books under their belts. Others are people who just write for fun. Then there are the people who always longed to write, but never really had a chance to put their thoughts on paper. Contests give each of these kinds of writers and all the other ones in between them a chance to try out a new story or poem or write in a genre they haven't yet explored. Contests like this also broaden Southwest Writers' exposure for anyone interested in writing and hopefully garner new members for us. Our annual contests are open to everyone. You don't need to be a member of Southwest Writers to enter. And in the past, announcements about the year's contest are usually posted on our website and in our monthly newsletter, The Sage, sometime by February or March. Every entry submitted to this year's contest was read and critiqued by at least 2 judges. This year we had a panel of 24 judges drawn from published authors and editors from within our writing community. Each entry was scored on 10 separate criteria, which were worth 10 points apiece for a total of 100 points possible. 8 criteria were common to all the entries. The last 2 criteria were specific to either poetry or fiction or nonfiction. The entries were read and scored by 2 different judges and awarded points. We tallied the total from both judges and the entries with the highest totals won in their categories. And if we had a tie, a 3rd judge was brought in to read and rate the entries, and the scores were tallied again. We had 11 categories for prose and 6 categories for poetry this year. In both prose and poetry, we had memoir, historical, humor, animals, social consciousness, and spirituality. We also had 5 additional categories in prose: suspense, science fiction, romance, mystery, and historical fiction. We received 242 entries for this year's contest. I tend to think a lot of people had time on their hands, what with the pandemic, for us to receive so many entries. All but one of our winning entries appears in the Southwest Anthology, Seeing the World in 2020. In all the categories, we awarded gold, silver, and bronze. However, in two of the poetry categories, animal and humor, we only had enough entries to award gold and silver. So I encourage you to sit back and listen to our award-winning authors tonight. And if you'd like to read more from our authors, please go ahead and check out the anthologies on Bookworks and at your local bookseller. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Brenda. All right, we have two books. 2019, the readers are going to be Brenda, Cole, Kimberley Rose, and myself. And in 2020, I have everybody's picture covering up. It's going to be, I can't see it, hold on. It's going to be Joe Brown, John Cornish, Marie Kern, Princess Miller, Charles Powell, and Desiree Woodland. It will be a combination of poetry and prose. Now, the first one is going to be a story, a prose story written by Joe Brown. Sorry, that's my finger that made this mistake here. Hold on. Okay. Let me read you Joe's biography. Joe Brown enjoys writing memoirs and historical fiction. He retired from his military and civil service careers in 2010 as a senior analyst advising the commander, Air Force Flight Test Center. He advised on strategic issues, collaborating with senior national leaders across the Department of Defense test and evaluation enterprise. And now he is a dedicated writer. We are going to hear from him the story, Hey Coach. Go ahead, take it away, Joe.
All right. I'm retired from the Air Force, as mentioned. I coached high school football for over 10 years while I was on active duty at Edwards Air Force Base. This is part of a story about me and one of my players, David Flogger. David became an excellent high school football player. His senior year was special, and what made it special started in a football game in Bishop, California. It was getting close to halftime, and neither team had scored. After we had kicked to the Bishop's team, David come running off the field, red-faced, with his fists clenched. Coach, coach! He had a crazed look in his eye. What, Flogger? What's wrong? He's calling me girly and princess and some names I won't tell you. Well, who is? Their middle linebacker, number 55. That bothers you, David? Yes, sir. He's making fun of my hair. Well, David had beautiful long red hair that flowed out under his helmet. Well, what are you going to do about it? Well, what do you mean, coach? I would never tell any player to break the rules, but why don't you kick his butt? What? How? When we get the football, on the first play, you fire out and knock 55 to the ground. I mean, knock 55 into next week. Do you understand? I think so, coach. Well, what if the play called has me doing something else? David, for this one play, you go get that guy. Got it? With a big grin on his face, he said, got it, coach. I went directly to our head coach who calls offensive plays. Leroy, call the first play with Mayfield running off right guard. Leroy looked puzzled and asked, well, why, coach? I grinned and said, Flogger's going to settle a score with the middle linebacker. Sure, we can do that. Mayfield, our running back, was fast and talented. We got the ball back about 40 yards from Bishop's goal line. Leroy called the play, and David exploded toward number 55. You heard the sound of the impact of David's block throughout the stadium. The Bishop High coaches had to help 55 off the field. Mayfield ran for a touchdown, That play gave the team a spark and we won the game. But the best part was when David came off the field after that play. He was beaming. Coach, did you see it? Did you? Boy, oh boy, did you? I sure did, buddy. And I doubt you'll hear another word out of him tonight. He didn't. 55 didn't make a good play for his team for the rest of the game. But the best night of that season for David and me was still to come. It was senior night with its ceremony at halftime. Each senior on the team remained on the field. Their parents came out of the stands. The players give a rose to a parent during the ceremony. That's always touching and adds a great memory to any season. But before the game, I was sitting in a corner of the locker room when I heard a familiar voice say, "Hey, Coach, can we talk?" "Well, sure, David. What's on your mind?" You know tonight's senior night, right?" "Yes, and I look forward to meeting your folks." Towering over me, he looked almost embarrassed as he stared down at his feet, saying, "Come on, Coach. How long have you known me?" Since you were in junior high." "That's right. And have you ever seen either my mom or dad?" "Well, no, I haven't. That's why I said what I did." "Coach, they're not going to be here. That's why I wanted to talk to you." "Well, okay." "Coach, would you be my dad tonight during the ceremony?" I practically melted. I knew we had become close over the years, but David asking me that, that far exceeded anything I could have imagined. I said, "David, it would be my honor. Are you sure?" With tears beginning to show. "Yes, Coach, and thanks." At halftime, I counted the people forming the two lines of parents and players so I could arrive with David. I had not had a chance to let the announcer know what David and I planned, but there was no need. Roger Bean, the announcer, knew David and me very well, and I had figured it out, and he had figured it out when we got to the head of the line. You heard across the stadium, "Next, number 75, David Flogger, starting right guard, and his friend, Coach Joe Brown." Well, the stadium erupted in applause, and I experienced a moment I will never forget as this big bear of a guy hugged me and whispered, "Thanks, Coach. This means a lot to me." That's it.
Thank you very much, Joe. Am I muted? Can you guys hear me? You can? Okay. All right. Our next story is from the 2020 anthology. It is a humor piece, and it was awarded the Silver Medal, and it was by Marie Kern. Let's see, Amanda, would you like to read Marie Kern's bio for us?
Sure thing. Before making her home in Albuquerque, Marie Kern grew up in a large Catholic family in Indianapolis. With a plethora of stories to call upon, she is contemplating a book about this lively group she will entitle The Kern Kids. Stay tuned for more fun with goats, rotten apples, stone monasteries, and camping at Starve Hallow. Are you there, Rosemary?
Yes, I am.
Well, hello.
Greetings, and thank you for allowing me to appear this evening. I appreciate that Bookworks is carrying our books for us.
Thank you. We're pleased to be here hosting. What have you got to read to us tonight?
A little story that took place when I was a kid. It's fairly short, but you know, it's the humor category, so hopefully you'll enjoy it.
All right.
The Lamb Cake by Marie Kern. Every year at Easter, my mom made a chocolate lamb cake using a mold. She slathered it with vanilla icing and pressed coconut flakes on the outside. The baking mold had openings on the sides in case you overfilled it, and usually we kids would be glad to munch on the parts that seeped out and baked on the cookie sheet. One year, my 11-year-old sister, Bunny, got a new puppy a week before Easter. Like most puppies, it had a few accidents, which she always cleaned up. Dad had to work late on Good Friday and came home after Mom and the rest of us were already in bed. Quietly, he made his way into his bedroom, which was illuminated only by moonlight through the window. As he walked around to his side of the bed, he saw a dark, ropey puddle on the floor. Very quietly, he said, "Oh, God, what the?" Phew. He stood up and went out of the bedroom and over to the foot of the stairs, as though he was really hoping that someone was awake. He walked back to the bedroom, gagged, then upstairs to the kitchen, then back down, where he threw a kitchen towel on top of the pile and opened the window next to the bed. He undressed and for once did not kneel down beside the bed to say his prayers. Mom, on her side of the bed, it was all she could do not to break out laughing, but she just pretended to be asleep, listening to Dad gag and choke and groan and try to breathe heavily into his pillow. He finally got to sleep, and she reached up and closed the window because it was getting cold. A little while later, he woke up, gagging, and opened the window again. He put his face right up to the screen and breathed heavily a few times before laying back down and burying his nose in the pillow. Now, according to Mom, this went on all night long. She would wake up, close the window, he would wake up and open it again. Early the next morning, Mom got up at her usual time, which also made Dad wake up. As she got up, Dad said, "Mother, do you smell anything?" And she said, "No, honey," which he did not believe. With a serious expression, he said, "Well, if you look over on my side of the bed, Bunny's puppy left us a present." So with a serious expression, Mom went around to the side of the bed, and then unable to hold it any longer, she yelled, "Bunny!" My sister knew what was going on, and she pelted down the staircase to the master bedroom. Dad looked at her and said, "Come over here and see what your dog did." Bunny went over and knelt on the floor and poked her finger into the pile. Dad got all agitated and said, "Don't do that. Go and get something to clean it up." So Bunny lifted the pile off the floor and ate it.
Okay, the good trick. All right, let me go on to the next
one. We would play jokes
one.
on each other a lot when I was a kid.
All right, thank you, Rose.
You're welcome, and thank you again.
Okay, we are going to go on to hear a story by Kimberley Rose from the 2019 anthology. It's called Wish Upon a Star, and it is a silver medal winner. And Amanda, can you read Kimberley Rose's bio?
Absolutely. Kimberley Rose, she received her BA in English from the University of New Mexico, right up the road from my house. She's published short stories and poems and has won awards in the Southwest Writers Contest for the last couple of years. She currently is an EMT in Albuquerque. All right. Hey, Kimberley.
Hi.
How you doing?
I'm great. How are you?
Doing
well. Okay. So I'm not going to read all of this, but books make an excellent Christmas gift if you want the 2019 anthology. So without further ado, here's Wish Upon a Star. To die from being slowly consumed by a black hole wasn't the worst fate Estelle could imagine, but it came close. No, the worst fate would be for all of the thousands of innocent asteroids to die. Her own death would be far more tolerable than that of so many asteroids. As best she could figure, they were still some 20 light years away from the event horizon, for all the good that measurement did her. This close to a black hole, 20 light years could be 20,000 or 20 thousandths. Estelle held her star chart up to her eyes and peered past the slowly warping near space. She already knew there were no void currents near enough to save them, but she had to look again, had to hope that her memory, thousands of years strong, had failed her in this. For a second, she was deceived, reading a line on the map so many light years from where she knew it to be. The map trembled as she gripped it. But she could not feel a void current leading away from the singularity of certain death. It was a sense that had never failed her before, allowing her to find and follow those slick pathways through the stars. Her asteroids were doomed. Estelle propelled herself on her gossamer tendrils that reached through the void, grabbing the strand of the current she was in and launching herself upstream. This current wasn't supposed to lead into a black hole. She could just see the path of it, the direction from which they'd come, twisting down the southern Achilles quadrant of sky. She remembered taking this path as a young Strayed, shepherding her first field of wishes home to be granted. Estelle touched each asteroid she passed, her starlight-colored tendrils trailing over the wishes embedded in each one. If the black hole consumed her field, all those wishes would be lost forever. She could travel up current as long as she had her field around her. If she went any farther, she'd be abandoning her asteroids. She could climb from the current on her own for a while, but in doing so, she'd be forsaking everything she lived for. Her life wasn't worth the lives of all these asteroids. They were innocent and trusting and followed the currents wherever they went. The only way this current went was forward, and forward meant annihilation. Estelle paused at an asteroid embedded with a wish the color of a small star near the end of its lifespan. It was a small wish. On a pale planet, somewhere half a quadrant away, a young man had wished for a flowering plant that had been damaged. He wished for it to live, for it to continue to flourish as it had in his childhood. Estelle didn't know the man or the plant or the circumstances following the plant's ill fortune and the man's attachment. She didn't know what would happen if the wish were granted. That wasn't her job. Her job was simply to escort it to someone who could grant it. Knowing it was futile, Estelle consulted the star chart again. It told her what she already knew. As she moved, her tendrils dragged in a way she'd never before experienced. She feared the moment when simply being would take more time than she had left. Would she be aware of it, or would awareness slow to the point of not existing like the rest of her field? It was unthinkable, unimaginable. It was something Estelle couldn't allow to happen. She had a limited number of light beam message capsules she could send. Soon it wouldn't matter, as the light beams wouldn't be able to carry the message away from the black hole. Estelle wrapped several of her tendrils around the capsule and inscribed a simple plea for help. She included her coordinates and the name of the current that had led them here. The name of the current shined against the backdrop of the void. The message capsule burned with the muted radiance of a molted planet encrusted in a layer of ice. Beautiful, desperate. She cast it away toward the innermost portion of this quadrant. That was where her message would be most likely to find another Strayed who could offer help. When the first plea was sent, she recorded another 3 and sent them in different directions. That left her with 1 message left to record if there was no one to answer her first 4. One last hope for her to tell the universe of her fate and to warn others not to follow. With her messages sent and with nothing to do but wait and hope, Estelle wrapped her tendrils around the 100 foremost asteroids, each carrying wishes of varying brightness and hue. She was already slow, thanks to the proximity of the black hole, but the encumbrance made the journey to the back of the field a long one. She deposited those 100 wishes as far from the black hole as she could, and returned to grab the next group. This time she moved slower. Estelle wouldn't be able to keep this up for long, and even as she moved her field backward, the current ushered it ever forward. The only thing she could be thankful for as the asteroids progressed down the path was that as they neared the end, they moved slower. Maybe if they were lucky, they would slow to the point of not moving at all, just in time, and would never become consumed, but instead frozen in space, preserved for some future Strayed to rescue. Estelle paused in her task and looked about the starry void, hoping to see a friendly face speeding toward her through the dark. Many light years away, a spark of light traced a path across boundless space, an asteroid in flight, shining to show that it was ready to take on a wish. As a Strayed, it was against everything Estelle had been taught to take a wish for herself, to use the powers of an asteroid to benefit herself and prevent some innocent being on a faraway planet from making a wish of their own. Estelle wished, modeling it after every wish she'd seen embedded in her asteroids. She closed her senses to everything except the shooting star in the distance. Everything she had, everything she was, went into her wish. It took her an eternity to reopen her senses, and when she did, she no longer saw the shooting star. She didn't expect it to work, and even if her wish were granted, it would probably be too late for herself and her field. And that's where we stop.
Oh, thank
Get the
you.
book, read the rest.
Yes, get the book, read the rest. Okay, let's go on to John Cornish. He has a poem called Splits, and it's the bronze medal winner in the biography memoir poetry in the 2020 anthology. Amanda, you have his bio, right?
I do.
Okay.
John is a retired teacher and a higher education administrator who is literally rewriting his career. He writes mostly science fiction, but poetry was his first love. John Cornish.
Well, thank you all. I appreciate the invitation to read tonight.
Thank you.
I'll just get right into it. Splits, same birthday. We rush one long laugh length down, climb puffing, perch on the brink in a saucer sled, snowfall coating us, the scent from your hair, more pungent than pine pitch or candle smoke. We are born just inside Aquarius, me 44, you infinity, upside right, and the sum of your potent, razzle-dazzle, deep open eyes. Today you are 8, too cruel to care about it, while I'm inspired by it, by our balance in years, and by my halved life, though I might mean something sad by decay, since growing old splits youth into age. But I rejoice in the scale of my life as measured by yours, my heartbeat quickened by the scope of our adventures someday to be sung by your memory. We launch, snow flying from our future into our faces, sleds spinning frontward, backward, frontward, bouncing your arms, wrapped fast around my legs during our wild, rush down cold conductivity. We lurch to a stop, my butt suffers, but we both split the lumbering air with our intimate and ageless laughter. That's it, thanks.
Thank you very, very much. Makes me want to go sledding. Okay. All right. Our next piece of poetry is by Desiree Woodland. It is called Goodnight Moon, and it is the bronze medal winner. I am going to read Desiree's bio. Desiree Woodland lives in Albuquerque, New Mexico. Following Ryan's suicide, and you will know what that means in a moment, she wrote as a way to heal and published a memoir called I Still Believe, Mental Illness and Suicide in Light of Christian Faith. A retired teacher, she holds a master's level certificate in grief and loss. You're on, Desiree.
Thank you. Well, my piece is called Goodnight Moon. It is a children's book written by Margaret Wise Brown in 1947. And it's a love of children's books, and I'm sure it's available at Bookworks because it's still a popular goodnight book. So Goodnight Moon. Shards of light cut sharply through the southern-facing windows of the greenhouse. Dust particles dance and sway like fairies, celebrating the last rays of sun before evening. I sink into the comfortable green couch that was my family's refuge in times when children's tears needed comforting, sprained ankles and fevers required rest, and just plain old snuggling was required. I wait for my son Ryan to finish dressing for bed and join me for our nightly story time ritual. No longer a toddler, he was a busy 5-year-old with legs sturdy enough to win races with his older sister, climb the cottonwood tree behind our house, and ride his bike to the end of the street by himself. Are you ready yet, little man? I call, hoping my voice carried up the stairs. Soon I hear small footsteps running down to join me. I scoop him up, noticing he's chosen his light blue t-shirt with Alvin and the Chipmunks on the front, and I wrap him in the cocoon of my grandmother's colorful Afghan. He smiles and works his arm out to encircle my waist and lay his head on my shoulder. Life will never be better than this, I think to myself. I close my eyes to savor the love of this precious moment. Surely heaven will be like this. I tilt my head to kiss the top of his blonde head and linger to breathe in the fragrance of shampoo and soap. Little boys can get so sweaty after a day of playing outdoors, but tonight, freshly bathed, I revel in his scent. I want Goodnight Moon, he says in a husky little boy voice. Of course, I want Goodnight Moon too. Such a simple book, but the repetition has always tickled Ryan's funny bone. Tonight is no exception. When we get to the part where the little old lady whispers hush and bids goodnight to Mush, he cannot contain his laughter. Giggles roll over him as he repeats the words again and again. Good night to the little old lady. Good night, Moon, and good night, Mush. This precious memory is tucked away in my heart. Ryan died by suicide at age 24, and I struggled to make sense of it. Grief had spun my life out of control, and I needed to hold on to something bigger than myself. The moon in the night sky became a symbol that supported me during the most intense sadness. Each month I watched as the moon completed its phases, and I was filled with a sense of mystery and the overwhelming peace that I craved. The moon was a shining beacon to my heart, a powerful sign that one day all will be well. Psalms 89:37 says, "It shall be established forever as the moon and as a faithful witness in heaven." Selah. God is present in the seemingly random events of our lives, as well as tragedies that make no sense. But he has set signs in the earth as reminders of his eternal faithfulness. Even now, nearly 14 years later, when the moon is full, I often go outside and gaze upward and think about God's faithfulness. Sometimes with tears, sometimes without, I whisper to Ryan, "Good night, dear son. Never goodbye, but see you later. Good night, sleep well. I will see you in my dreams, and one day I will again hold you in my arms."
Desiree, thank you for that very, very moving poem,
Thank you.
for sharing it with us.
Thank you.
Moving on, our next story, or excerpt from the story, is by author Brenda Cole, and it is called Permission, and it was the gold medal winner in the self-help prose category in 2019. I guess, Amanda, do you have Brenda's bio?
I do.
Okay.
Brenda Cole is an award-winning author of nonfiction short stories. She's been an educator for children from preschool age through high school. She has multiple life science degrees and has taught biology and Western medicine at 3 different places. Currently, she splits her time between writing, art projects, and genealogy. Hi, Brenda.
Hi. All right. This is about a third of the story, and it's entitled Permission. Major events in one's life seem to come in cycles. Often during a crisis, a simple phrase or thought will occur that will have a lasting impact on how we handle future dramatic passages. We may not realize until days or years later how profoundly that simple phrase will affect the course of our life. Thanksgiving night of 2009 was the beginning of a 9-year cycle consisting of 3 separate milestones. My father was a Korean War vet who had been diagnosed with emphysema in 1959. By 2009, he'd suffered through more collapsed lungs and surgeries than I could count. He'd also survived 2 bouts of prostate cancer and had just come back for a 3rd time. He was hospitalized on 3 liters of oxygen, and his 6'5" frame was down to 150 pounds. On Thanksgiving night, he had my brother call so he could say goodbye to me. All he did was ask me to forgive him, which I immediately affirmed. He gasped out something about needing to stay here and take care of us kids and Mom. 3 hours later, he quietly passed in his sleep. The next part of the cycle occurred in July of 2012. My 98-year-old grandmother had lived with Parkinson's for 20 years and was now hospitalized with multiple heart issues. She refused all the tests, food, drink, and any intervention. I got to speak with her that afternoon. In between bites of a sandwich, she asked me if I minded if she went to see her mom. Her mother had passed back in 1928. I assured her it was okay. Just like my father, she said she'd been hanging around because of the rest of the family. I deliberately told her she had my permission, if she needed it, to pass over. She passed about 10:30 that night. At her memorial service, my mom told me Grandma had also asked her if it was all right for her to pass over. The final part of the cycle happened just last summer in June of 2018. My mother had been ill since 2010 when she developed breast cancer. It took 5 years of hell from chemo to abate enough that she could travel again. Less than a year after that, the first signs of a progressive muscular disorder showed up. In April of 2018, I had to make the decision that she needed to go into a skilled nursing facility. She was not getting better and was unable to take care of herself. We finally got the correct test performed, and they confirmed my worst fears. Saturday morning, her neurologist wanted to speak with both of us, and after apologizing profusely, he said that she had advanced ALS and had been misdiagnosed for over 2 years. That afternoon of the diagnosis, she spoke with me and asked me point blank if I was okay with her crossing the bridge. I knew she meant she was ready to die. I got my emotions under control and told her yes, if that's what she needed to do, then I supported her choice. She took a breath and in a gravelly yet focused voice told me she was standing on the bridge and would I please help her cross over. I was shocked and touched that she came to me for help. I spent an hour walking her through a guided meditation so that in her mind she could disconnect from the living world and walk over her spirit bridge to the afterlife. I fully expected her to die that night or the next day. Monday morning, the hospice nurse arrived to start moving Mom to their facility. She took one look at her and said she was already in transition and would probably pass that day in the hospital. Mom managed to say goodbye to me that morning and quickly became unresponsive. I told her everything was taken care of and again gave her permission to walk over her bridge when she was ready. She passed about 1 p.m. that afternoon. Over the next 10 months, I progressed through my grieving. Eventually, I started to focus on what was the similarity between all three of their deaths. In each case, illness had left them barely able to take care of themselves, yet each of them appeared most frustrated because they couldn't help me or my siblings. The other commonality was their difficulty in letting go of situations or events in the past. My parents had an extremely strong work ethic. Both started working in their teens and only retired in their late 60s. I had wondered if this drive to always be contributing and the unwillingness to quit had played a role in their limited willingness to simply be present and not worry about the future. The concept of letting go and letting someone else, even deity, deal with an issue was not in their mindset. That's why the last conversation I had with my mom was so startling. I believe that faced with the reality of such a horrific diagnosis as ALS and that she was in the end stage of it, enabled her to change her focus and embrace the present. It was as if she realized she no longer had the time to dwell anywhere except right now. The concept of being present isn't a new one. In Ram Dass's pivotal book, Be Here Now, and Eckhart Tolle, The Power of Now, both advocated focusing on the present moment. In The Artist's Way, Julia Cameron states, the reward for paying attention is healing. In my mother's case, this could not have been more true. By paying attention to what was really going on in her body, she was able to take charge and effect a change for herself. Even movies have used the concept of being in the present. In George Lucas's Star Wars Episode 1, The Phantom Menace, this concept was one of the founding tenets of the Jedi Order. In the beginning of the film, Qui-Gon Jinn turns to his student, Obi-Wan Kenobi, and reminds him, your focus determines your reality. And the rest of it is in our book.
Thank you, Brenda. Okay, on to Princess Miller. She won the bronze medal in the Cultural Historical Poetry section for her poem, Children in the Cave. Let's hear her bio.
Princess A. Miller is the award-winning author of God's Little Sunflower, When a Child Dies, a poetic memoir of her grief journey. She is published in Upper Room, which is distributed in 33 languages in over 100 countries. She aims to leave a legacy of poetry that changes everything. You can find her work at projectsunflower.net. Good evening, Princess.
Good evening. Such a blessing to be here.
For joining us.
Yes. I first want to thank God for allowing this opportunity. I also wanted to give a shout out to my fellow writers and my inspiration crew for being in this moment with me. So thank you, everybody who showed up. This poetry piece, Children in the Cave, was birthed from a writing prompt in a workshop at a writers conference here in San Antonio, Texas. And in that workshop, the class was asked to list 3 events, one personal, one in the community, and one international. And then we were supposed to write on the one that made us most uncomfortable. So I chose the international event about the 12 boys and their football coach that ended up being trapped in a cave back in July of 2018. So our instructions were to write for 5 minutes, and after about a 30-second mind blank, the words began to pour out on the paper. And so as I worked on this piece, the focus was international, but then it morphed into community, and then it became personal. So I will share that with you right now. Children in the cave. There are some children in a cave. Saw it on TV. Many people trying to figure how to get them out. There are some children in a cave. Thailand, international news. Commands movement, demands a response. There are some children in a cave. 17 days, deep darkness, airless, famished, fatigued. Trending news, heroic moves, children in the cave. Prayers, action, miraculous rescue. There were some children in the cave. And yet, I still hear voices. Children in caves. Caves of poverty, gangs, fatherless, drugs, aimless, trafficking, homeless, abuse. There are children still in the cave, waiting. Thank you.
Very, very much for sharing that, Princess. Interesting writing prompt. Let's go on. This is me. Okay, you've already heard my bio, so there's no reason to repeat it. The excerpt from the story I'm going to read today, the story is called Woven, and it won the silver medal in 2019 in the thriller, suspense, horror prose. Let me give you a little bit of background. I came up with this fictional story on my way back one night from the Crown Point Navajo rug auction. Let me begin. As I lifted the feather duster to brush the finely woven Navajo rug, I noticed white wool strands had emerged through the gray yarn at the lower left corner. I removed the rug from its hanging strip and noticed the errant threads of wool seemed to form the letters R and E in a cursive writing. Squinting hard, I mumbled, "What the damn? I'm going to have to take it to the rug guru repair guy in town. I don't want it to unravel." I held it at eye level, and the hairs on the back of my neck stood up. Dropping the rug on the floor, I ran out of the house, spooked, remembering. At the Navajo auction in Crown Point, a collector can bid on a Navajo rug, meet the weaver, and avoid paying the doubled or tripled price demanded by a retail shop. Traveling on I-40 west from Albuquerque, Crown Point is northwest of Grants and northeast of Gallup. It is lonely, red, gold, rust and tan toned country, peppered with hardy desert brush, the only green in sight, offset by a colorful sky of pink, salmon, russet, and blue. Mesas, sandy hills, distant mountains, and arroyos paint the landscape in scenes, sorry, that's my mistake, in scenes of desolate beauty, quiet and mysterious. As the sun melted below a western mesa, the terrain glowed as it does in the Southwest. What would I purchase? At the auction, 3 rugs caught my attention. One was a large 2 gray hills design sporting its typical intricate pattern in black, white, and gray. The second was a banded crystal rug in soft tones of gray, beige, bronze, and white. It was subtle and understated. The third was a yei rug of indigenous deities. As the bidding progressed, I dropped out for the 2 gray hills rug and won the yei weaving. The crystal was one of the last items presented, and after some back and forth bidding repartee, I won it. After I paid for my purchase, I was gathering my things from my seat when I felt a gentle tug on my sleeve, halfway up my arm. I turned to see a wizened, elderly, nut-brown face looking up at me. Being just a few inches over 5 feet myself, I towered over her, and that was an unusual experience for me. The wrinkled old woman pointed a bony finger at my crystal rug. The young lady with her said, "My great-grandmother made that rug you purchased." I held the rug's tag and pointed to the name printed on it. "You're Etta?" I asked the weaver. She smiled a giant, nearly toothless grin at me and nodded her head. Her small face lit up with sparkling light brown eyes. "I am Fay," I said. I ran my hands across the horizontal design. "This is a beautiful rug." Etta's companion interpreted my words, and Etta smiled broadly before quieting, whispering something in her great-granddaughter's ear. My great-grandmother said this is the last rug she will ever weave. She has made many during her life, but her eyes are going dim and her fingers stumble with the wool. "I am glad you told me," I said to Lily, who by now had introduced herself to me. The knowledge it is Etta's last rug makes it even more special. Once again, Etta whispered something to Lily. I noticed that Lily kind of cocked her head and made a face as her great-grandmother spoke to her, as if suspicious of what she had just heard. Etta tugged at my sleeve again and pointed to Lily. I got the feeling Lily didn't want to translate what she had just been told, but Etta was insistent. Lily cleared her throat. "Ma'am, you don't have to believe this, but my great-grandmother wants me to tell you that this rug has magic in it. Magic that will take effect only after she passes to the next life." "Magic?" I asked, somewhat amused. "What does that mean?" Once again, Etta talked with Lily. "It is good magic if you live your life positively. Bad if you don't." "Well, then, I guess I'd better be good," I responded. As we said our goodbyes, Etta grasped my arm, raised her hands to my face, and gently caressed my cheeks with her ancient palms. I cupped my hands over hers, then lowered them, held on to them, and thanked her. Once at home, I placed the Yei rug on my piano bench and found a spot above the fireplace for the new magic crystal rug. It fit beautifully there. And I tucked away Etta's statement about the rug being magical. And I want to read what happens. You have to get the anthology. So let's move on. I think this is our last reading by author Charles Powell. It is a spiritual philosophical poem called Bad Wants Company and So Does Good. Charles, are you online on Zoom or via phone? You weren't before. Are you there?
I'm here.
Good. I'm
Yeah.
going to have Brenda read your bio first, okay?
Okay.
All right, Brenda, you're on.
All right. Charles Powell, grandfather, Air Force veteran, and retired postal worker. With a BS in social sciences, he's been published in the Southwest Writers Sage and the Fixed and Free Poetry Anthology. He's also enjoyed success with prose and poetry in several Southwest Writers Writing Contests. Raised in Chicago, Albuquerque's been home for 34 years. All right, Charles, go for it.
Thank you. I'm really honored to be among the readers here tonight. It's making me feel that I really belong with poets. This is titled Bad Wants Company, So Does Good. When I feel the smallest, the weakest, the most insignificant and vulnerable, the most impotent, insecure and unsure, and unimportant, uncomfortable, and saddened. My most dejected, deprived, discouraged, dispirited, disadvantaged, disappointed, depressed, ashamed, and unhappy. I'm also more likely to be suspicious, distrustful, fearful, angry, selfish, defensive, and bitter. My judgment of others is more apt to be insensitive, harsh, and severe. On the other hand, when I feel the strongest, the most significant, effective, potent, content, fit, secure, forceful, and certain, my most important, confident, fortunate, satisfied, pleased, positive, and joyful, I'm also more likely to be considerate, pleasant, patient, peaceful, helpful, cooperative, friendly, forgiving, thoughtful, trusting, calm, kind, and generous.